Okay, so first of all, I just want to make sure that everybody that is here is in the right place. This is a statewide grant program, but every county is handling it a little bit different. So in order to benefit from this meeting, you need to either be a nonprofit in Orange County, you need to be a business located in Orange County, or you need to be an artist that lives in Orange County. I've had some people contact me who, they might be a nonprofit that serves the residents of Orange County, but they are physically located in, let's say, Durham. They will need to go through the Durham Arts Council because, again, everybody's handling this a little bit different. A lot of counties are only opening this up to nonprofits. We have kind of expanded it a little bit, so I don't want you to get the wrong information. There is a link here, and if you go to our website to artsorange.org and you go to the NC, it's artsorange.org/NC Cares. This is hyperlinked, so this will tell you if you live in another county who you need to go through to apply for this funding. So the NC Cares grant is a result of $9.4 million of federal CARES Act money, and that's really important, which we'll get to shortly. And it has been allocated by our state legislation. So this is at least for right now, it's a one-time thing. And it is being handled through the North Carolina Arts Council. The Arts Council already has a network of county councils throughout the state, which are called the designated county partners. And we are the designated county partner for Orange County. So we are the ones that are handling this money and other state money that filters throughout the year. The purpose of this grant is to, quote, mitigate business disruptions caused by COVID-19. In other words, it's to reimburse expenses that have either already happened or are going to happen before the end of the year. So Naris asked this earlier, but we will be dispersing $166,510 in CARES Act funding through this grant program. Like I said earlier, the time frame is super tight. It's open right now. It closes October 30th at 11:59 p.m. And so that's next Friday. So you've got, less than 2 weeks to apply. But we also kept that in mind when making the application. It's as simple as it can be, considering, the financial documentation and stuff that we needed to get in order to make good funding decisions. Our panel, which will be advisory board members of the Arts Commission, will meet the week of November 2nd, and then the funding decisions will be taken to our full board on November 9th. And then we hope to have the funds dispersed by the end of November. Of course, that is all contingent upon the state getting the funding to us so that we can then get it to you. But basically, it's ASAP. So we want the whole thing to be done as quickly as possible. Eligibility, 501c3 nonprofit organizations with the arts-based mission are first priority. And that is the intention of the state that, that was made very clear when the funding was approved. But we also had the opportunity to open it up to businesses and artists. It just depends on the county and depends on the makeup of our county. And so that's why we decided to open it up. UNC is eligible to apply. I know a few of y'all are on here from different arts agencies with UNC. Those applications will be handled separately. You'll apply through us, but the application will be reviewed by the State Arts Council and by the organization they're working with, NC Pro. It's the Pandemic Recovery Office, and that is to ensure basically that there's not unintentional double dipping. The thought being the universities, just like our municipalities and our counties, have received a lot of CARES funding already. And one would hope that at the university level, some of that CARES Act funding would have trickled down to the arts agencies. We don't know if that's the case here or not. So we're letting UNC groups apply, and then we'll evaluate what has already been received or maybe not, and we'll go from there. So that is also the reason why municipal governments and county governments are not eligible to apply, because they should have already received a lot of CARES funding. Community-based nonprofits like non-arts organizations, cultural organizations, things like that are eligible to apply, but 25% of the total operating budget has to be arts related. So that's, a quarter basically of the programming has to be focused on the arts in order to be eligible to apply for this grant. So arts programming can mean a lot of different things. It can mean events, it can mean classes, readings, exhibits. But all of it needs to involve professional artists. That's a key. It's not, classes hosted by someone's cousin who is a knitter or, whatever. Not that there's not professional knitters, high quality knitters. I'm not dissing the knitters. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Unincorporated arts groups or LLCs are eligible. We've got some new arts groups that have popped up in this year. Some of them opened right before COVID happened. We want those groups to be able to apply. So there's not technically a you must have been open for 3 years requirement like on some other grants, but the key is going to be that you were open long enough to show that you've got eligible expenses that could be reimbursed through this grant, and I'll get into that soon. And then businesses whose primary operations are in the arts. So that would be the galleries and our music venues, bookstores, and primary operations is really key. If you're a wine shop that has, live music on Friday nights, I'm sure you have been heavily impacted by this, but that's not the intention of this grant. It needs to be an arts related business. So there are so many grants out there right now, and it's a good thing, but it can get a little confusing. So I wanted to just put this chart in here. And some of this actually applies to organizations too. So if you're with an organization, don't tune out this slide. If you are wanting funding for your artistic development or professional development, the 2 grants that are ideal for that, which are both open right now, are the Artist Support Grant and the Emerging Artist Grant, which is that top line. That is a partnership between us and the Durham Arts Council. Artist Support Grant is something new that has been funded by the State Arts Council. Those close tomorrow at midnight. So you still have time to get one of those in. And then the Emerging Artist Grant closes in November. And those are solely for your artistic development, professional development. If you need money for essentials, like your personal essentials, like you need help paying rent or healthcare, things like that, that would be through our support fund. We've given out 3 rounds of grants. We will be giving out a 4th round early November. If you want to do a community-based art program, we have a program for that, which is our Artist Project Grant. We just awarded those for this year, but typically, we were really late this year awarding them because of everything going on. Typically, they open in early spring, so they will be reopening hopefully in the spring. And, those are a perfect opportunity if you've got an idea for some kind of program or project that impacts the community. That's the fund you want to apply to. This grant is to reimburse COVID-related expenses. So it's a very specific eligibility that you need to meet for this grant program. So speaking of eligibility, the big thing to remember is reimbursement. These are intended to reimburse expenses that have already incurred or you're going to incur between now and the end of the year. So that, to me, the easiest expenses would be things that typically fall under operating, things that you can very easily document. So rent and mortgage and utility bills, things like that. Salaries, contractors that you may have hired, but starting in March, including benefits. If you're a business owner or organization director, your benefits that have been paid to personnel are also eligible. Monthly expenses that were established prior to COVID, so loan payments. Expenses that you may have incurred for canceling programs. So, if you had to cancel a concert, but you already had a contract with the artist, you probably had to pay that artist. So that would be eligible. Virtual programming expense, you may have had to invest in equipment or supplies to do programming virtually. That would be eligible. And then, of course, safety and cleaning measures. You maybe have hired a company to come in and clean your business on a regular basis, or you've had to purchase PPE. All of those types of things are eligible. So for the expenses that have already occurred starting March 1 and until the time that you apply for the grant, you will have to provide documentation if you're funded. So if you get funded, we will then send you an email and say, okay, you've been funded. Please send us, your receipts or your invoices, a financial statement, your payroll ledgers, basically valid documentation proving that you have incurred these expenses. For expenses that are going to be incurred through the end of the year, you will be required to submit documentation. So just keep that in mind. If you get approved, you're going to most likely have to file a monthly check-in report and upload those documents that you're receiving the funding for. So what's ineligible? Unfortunately, revenue losses are ineligible, and I know that's a big bummer, and I'm sorry. Expenses that have already been reimbursed through the CARES Act. So if you've already received a PPP loan, or maybe you received one of the grants directly through the NEA that came from CARES, those things that you use that CARES Act money to pay, you can't receive additional money because that's double dipping essentially. So you'll see in the application, there's a worksheet where you'll have one chart where you're entering all of your expenses that are eligible. And then there's another chart where you're listing any CARES Act funding you've already received, whether it's a loan or a grant through the NEA or, I think like Orange County Economic Development had some CARES Act funding that they were giving out to small businesses, things like that. If it originated from the CARES Act, then you're going to list that in a separate worksheet. And that's how we'll figure out what you still have left that would be eligible to be reimbursed. We're also asking you to list any other grants that you may have received. Just because we want to know, what else have you been able to find that's out there? So that's not really going to impact you one way or the other. We just want to know. So how will the grants be evaluated? Again, nonprofit arts organizations do have funding priority. All applicants, though, we will be looking at the size of the budget. We're going to look at what has already been reimbursed, like I just said. And we're going to look at the pre-pandemic programming, what was happening before March. What was the role of that organization or business or artist in our community before COVID-19, and how has the applicant been impacted and how has the applicant responded? And there's, regarding the response, it's not like there's necessarily a good answer to that. You know, in some instances, depending on what it is that you're involved in, there has been really no effective way to pivot. Some folks have been able to figure out ways to pivot, and some have tried. You know, it's just, there's no right or wrong answer right now. But again, we just want to know what you've been doing. For non-arts organizations, businesses, individuals, we're going to be really viewing these applications through the lens of impact. And that is solely because, you know, we have to have some criteria to view these applications through. 166,000 is not a whole lot of money. And we would like to be able to fund like every single person doing anything arts related in Orange County, period, but obviously we can't. So we've got to kind of put some parameters around it. So we decided for the other applicants, we're going to be looking through the lens of impact. So what does that impact mean? Actually, I'm jumping ahead, sorry. First off, we're going to verify that the applicant meets the 25% requirement. So, you know, if it's the Boys and Girls Club, for instance, applying, we are really going to be looking at the narrative and the organization financials to really make sure that 25% of that operating budget is arts-based. We're going to look at the pre-pandemic financials. You know, if an organization applies, but leading into COVID, they were kind of on shaky ground and things weren't going so great, the panel could very well not necessarily feel like that's the best funding choice. Because if it was already struggling before COVID, then it's most certainly struggling now. And so going back to the impact can mean a lot of different things. Obviously, it can mean tourism and foot traffic, but it also means employment. And that's not just staff, but that is also, you know, contractors, part-time folks. Impact can mean services and programming offered to residents and tourists. So if you think about like our music venues, that's a benefit offered for the community. And then impact also can relate just directly to our artist community. If you're a gallery and you typically are helping artists sustain themselves by helping, you know, by paying them a commission every month, that's a big impact in our arts community. Or you're a space provider for artists. That, you know, space is one of our major needs in Orange County. And so if you're one of the organizations or people that is helping meet that need, that's a big impact. So the applications are due at 11:59 on the 30th. That's next Friday. There is an online application, which I was going to show you, but I'm not going to pull it up since my internet is kind of wonky. But basically, it's relatively simple. It's through a program called Submittable that is user-friendly. If you've never used Submittable before, then you do have to create an account, but it's super easy. If you have used Submittable before, then you should be able to just log into your account with your password, and you'll see any other applications that you've submitted in the past. And you'll just go through it. There are 3 different worksheets in it that I explained a minute ago. But it is pretty simple. We are asking for 3 years of 990s or 1055, depending on what you are. If you haven't been in existence that long, then you'll just upload what you do have. Trying to think what else. I'm sure you guys have a bunch of questions. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I am going to first look in the chat. Oh, look at Emily being so helpful. Lots of links. Check out her handiwork in the chat. And I am going to open it up for questions. So let me unmute everybody. I'm going to unmute everybody, but if you're not talking, please mute yourself so that we don't have a bunch of interference going on, okay? Okay, I'm hitting unmute. All right, yeah. Okay, who's up first? Milbury.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes, I put a question in the chat. When you were listing the 3 years of tax forms, do you want forms from individual artists too?
Yeah, and that's something I should have said. We are treating individual artists essentially as businesses. You know, you are a business, you are a sole proprietor or maybe an LLC. So yes, it's the same for individuals as it would be for businesses.
So that's your 1099s or W9s or what? I mean, do you have specific forms you're looking for?
Well, it depends on the forms that you file. So,
okay.
But since you mentioned that, I should probably specify that in the application.
That would be very helpful.
All right.
And one other question. So in terms of, you know, when I was applying for PUA, I provided the documentation about what I had been making up until March and also things that had been canceled as a result of COVID. So is that documentation helpful? Is that the individual's version of pre-pandemic financials?
Yes. Yes.
So whatever clarity you can provide about that would also be very helpful.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Is there an expected range of the awards? I cannot say that right now. There's so many variables. It depends on the applicant pool. There's just a lot of variables. So that is why, you know, we didn't set a request limit. We are going to just look at what I imagine will happen. And of course, I don't know this for sure. It is up to the panel and up to my board. But I imagine that we will look at the whole applicant pool and we will look at budget size and probably break our applicants into groups based on the budget size and go from there. So that's all I can really say right now about that. Operation expenses examples that are acceptable. That is, you know, rent, mortgage documentation, payroll ledgers, utility bills, contractor contracts, receipts, you know, for PPE purchases or equipment to enable virtual programming. It seems like more expense documentation is eligible than not. So as long as you've got an official receipt or contract or something on paper, then I would assume it's going to be eligible if you have not already been reimbursed for it.
I have a question regarding the kind of documentation you were talking about as far as 3 years of taxes or whatever it was. Like a space like Attic 506, which is a little, I was trying to write this in the chat, but I just couldn't even think about how to type this. But, it's like not a whole unit, Attic 506 is kind of a loose entity that houses other artists' projects, but the space itself invites people in,
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out, we want to kind of make sure we have our cleaning supplies and just like we have our, just trying to think about what you would want for what we could submit there.
So with an organization
Lease
like
information or something.
Oh, am I frozen? Can y'all hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. An organization like Attic 506, I kind of view similar to a artist collective gallery or any other kind of like co-op type situation. You would be eligible to apply from the organizational standpoint. So maybe it is different. Attic 506, the owner of that property would be able to apply as Attic 506 because they are providing a service to our arts community by having these artist spaces. So they would be able to apply, but then you as the individual artist would be able to apply on your own behalf as well. So same with like the co-ops. You could apply as the actual co-op business, but then your artist members are welcome to apply as well as individual working artists. Does that make sense? And I mean, obviously can y'all still hear me?
So as renters.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. The expenses would be different depending obviously on who's applying. If you're applying as Attic 506, you may be applying for reimbursement of a mortgage payment or the light bill. Whereas if you're applying as Jurston Crosby, you may apply for reimbursement for your rent that you've been paying to Attic 506 or any other personal expenditures that you've had related to your artwork business. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think because the owners of the building, I definitely think they could apply because they own local 506 and everything, but they're not involved at all with the space up there. So yeah, that's just I may have follow-up questions later.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I expect that. Roberta?
Yes. Am I speaking? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I think questions about 8 or 9 individual artists who pay rent. But as an organization, we don't file taxes as an organization. We don't have those tax forms. I think that each individual artist is handling it sort of the way they want to handle it, depending on how much sales they have but as an organization that provides programming and gallery space and lots of, sort of events, and it seems like we fit to apply. I'm just not sure about the documentation, like for rent, would each artist, if we pay by check, can you accept a canceled check, or do you want the person we pay the rent to come up with some. We have not received receipts in the past, but
Well,
we could.
again, I think there's a difference there between applying as a co-op versus applying as an individual. You know, the co-op as a whole can apply for, you know, whatever expenses need to be reimbursed. And then you, as an individual artist, can apply for reimbursement for your own rent. And in that event, yeah, we could, you know, if you pay by check every month, you could upload a copy of that check from your bank. You know, does that?
Well, so if we did that, I mean, we do pay a lot in rent, but each individual artist pays a slightly different amount because there's different size studios. And that's our main expense right now, is just keeping up with the rent so we don't have to close.
Right.
But if each individual artist submitted for the amount of rent that they've, you know, had to pay without being open, do you have to supply some kind of tax form? Because I don't think we have those tax forms that you're talking about.
Let me get back with you on that. That kind of goes back to Milbury's question. So I just want to get some clarification on that from the State Arts Council, and then I will get back and update
Sure.
our guidelines on the website too.
Sounds good.
There's lots of questions in the Amelia, I will reach out to you about the situation with UNC. Fleming, payroll expenses not covered by PPP. The state on staff without program considered Are payroll expenses not covered by PPP that stayed on staff without programming? Yes, definitely. Can you apply if you worked at a venue in Raleigh that is closed due to the pandemic? Yes. If you are an artist that lives in, okay, again, it's your business expenses. So like if you are an employee at a music venue in Raleigh that has been closed, that might be a better fit for the relief grant. Now, if you are an artist working in Orange County and this venue in Raleigh was contracting with you, then this would be a good fit because you have incurred expenses related to your business as an artist. Okay, I know I saw another hand. Was it Susan? Susan.
Now I'm unmuted. I have two questions. One has to do with, there's an item in here that asks you for lost attendance.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to know if that counts only the audiences at our performances, or would it also count the membership lost from rehearsals?
It counts performances. I specified that in the application. And now I can't remember what I said. But
I took notes from the application, so okay. I probably messed up.
Well, yeah, and I mean, pay attention to that because in the application there'll be the question and then there's a little field that kind of elaborates on what we're asking. So I believe that when we ask for lost attendance, that is performances or foot traffic, things like that. It doesn't count rehearsals for your group. Now, it can count classes though. If you're an arts organization that is offering classes and you've lost that attendance by not being able to host classes, then that would count. But if it's a membership-based organization where you have
Mhm.
rehearsals, then no. I mean, again, we're trying to just get impact numbers. So that really has
Mhm.
more to do with the programming that you're offering to the general public. And
Okay.
that's another thing I should have mentioned. We do ask for some impact numbers, like, how many staff have you had to lay off? Those are for our own knowledge. We just are trying to continue getting, an understanding of the impact here in Orange County. And it may or may not be relevant to the kind of business that you have.
Okay. My other question has to do with all the questions on the fields to fill out that are fiscal year based,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because our fiscal year starts August 1st. So for anything that has to do with, there's one question particularly that asks for fiscal year 1920 year to date, but that's a closed year for us. It's done. But then it asks for year to date actual income and expenses. That will only be like 2 months worth of data, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, if that's, it's all based on when your fiscal year ends and begins. So that'll be apparent in the documentation that you upload. So we'll be able to take
Okay.
that into consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I live in a different county, but I'm paying rent in Orange County. So am I eligible for that?
No. I think you
Okay.
would have to apply
No.
through you're in Person County, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you would need to apply through Person.
Okay. Well, that saves me a lot of trouble. I'm glad I asked.
Although I don't know if Person County is allowing
Probably.
individuals.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if they were. All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Oh, let's see. Does loss of expected donations due to canceled concerts? No, because it has to be something that is verifiable. A hard expense with documentation to back it up that your organization has had to pay. So lost donations kind of falls into that category of lost revenue, that it's just not verifiable. So we're really not able to cover that. Roberta?
So if I could ask one follow-up question about the rent. So if we were to apply as our co-op and provide on the application a total of how much rent was paid from March to December, and then, we as an organization would then divide it to the individual artist, because to have all these artists supply a different application seems burdensome to you and to us. But in that case, I'm not sure. I guess we'd have to ask, who we pay rent to supply us some kind of letter. Would you accept a letter that says from the co-op, we have received X amount of payment in rent from these months?
Yeah, or even again, just a copy of that check, or
Well, it's paid separately from each artist.
Oh, it is.
But
Okay.
it is paid
Yeah.
separately, but it
Okay.
comes to a total, and then, but it just seems like it would be so burdensome for every artist to submit an application, plus for you to have to review all of those. I mean, or, but whatever you need, it's a lot of money that we're paying to keep the facility viable for when we can open again.
I would definitely recommend like in your case, in the case of a co-op, applying as a co-op, because it's the impact you have as a collective is much greater than the impact you have as an individual. And again, we're viewing everything through that lens. And so some might be like, well, why are you even opening it up to individual artists if it's all about the impact? Well, there may be some individual artists who have a sizable business in the community, and maybe who typically are hiring contractors to work with them, or I don't know, there's just so many exceptions to the rule that we didn't want to rule anybody out. But I would think most likely, again, don't quote me even though I'm being recorded, if you're the average individual working artist, and you're probably a sole proprietor, and maybe you're renting space somewhere, but your expenses, relatively speaking, are nominal, I don't know that this is going to be the right fit. That would be something that you would definitely want to apply to the relief fund for, because we can help you reimburse, rental expense, whether it's studio space or your home or whatever it may be. So, but it also depends on the applicant pool. This window is so tight. That's another reason. The window is very tight. People are at max capacity. All of the eligible businesses and organizations may not apply. And if our artists are hustling and they get applications in, then they will end up getting more of the funding. So again, we just wanted to leave it open. Bridget.
I had a couple questions. First of all, I wasn't sure sorry, my dogs are barking. I wasn't sure if art therapy would sort of fall in this general category. I mean, we don't have performances that we haven't, that we've missed giving, but we have had, clients not able to show up, needing to cancel groups, that sort of thing. So does it make sense for us to apply? Is it sort of a combination mental health and arts organization?
Yeah, I think it does. And, again, kind of like with our other grants with you guys, we are basing it on the fact that you are an arts organization. We're not getting into the inner workings of what you do, because we are not qualified to evaluate that. But you are an arts organization. You're using the arts to serve the community. So you would definitely be eligible to apply.
Okay, and then one other question is, there's a small music therapy group that we're a fiscal sponsor for, and they were thinking of applying as well. Would there be an issue with both of us applying if we're a fiscal partner to them?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Because that'll be specified in the application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to note that there's some questions by Ginger, Fleming, and Susan in the chat.
Okay, I saw that Fleming left. So I'll talk to Fleming. Chris, would expect. Okay, we talked about that. Number of artists paid during the prior year. This is referring to the last full season, because half the season was canceled. We're just trying to get an idea of how many artists were you paying before COVID? So whether that is, however that falls in your fiscal year, it's not really about that. It's more about pre and post COVID. So I probably should specify that. And then Ginger, how is lost attendance not revenue? It is, but that question where we're asking for lost attendance is just as a statistic for our purposes. It's kind of separate. It's a separate part of the application, just because we're information gathering. It's like, while we've got you, tell us how you've been impacted, but it's not really in the factored into the eligible expenses to be reimbursed, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Thank you. Okay, I'm assuming that means it made sense. Okay, good. Oh, Fleming is still here. Fleming, so if you had to reduce class size due to social distancing, yes, that would definitely qualify, like, kind of indirectly, because you still had costs associated with putting those classes on, whether it's hiring a teacher or having the power on in the building, you know, all of those kind of things would be eligible. And that's another thing, which I'm surprised nobody's asked yet. A lot of people have said, well, can I apply to pay my rent for the next 3 months? Well, yes, you can. So that's probably not the best example. Let's say you need money for something that would not be eligible. So maybe you want to do a program in November and you need money to put the program on. This grant cannot cover the expenses related to that program, but what it can do is cover some of your other expenses that you've incurred, freeing up money for you to use on whatever it is you want to use it on. So I hope that makes sense. Milbury.
This was a question I asked in the chat. For those of us who have or do apply for artist support, and you're asking for other grants that we've gotten, would we put that in pending in our budget, because we don't know if we got it or not by the time this is due, when you're asking what other grants we've gotten?
You know, that's a good question that I should specify in the application, because we're really asking more for relief type grants that are COVID related. So artist support, well,
the artist support grant is about what are you trying to do,
yeah, it is.
you know, in this time. So
yeah,
even though it's not guaranteed,
right.
So.
No, yeah, right now it would be, what have you already received?
Okay.
So anything that you're still waiting to hear about would not be in there.
Okay.
But I do need to specify that we're talking about COVID related funding.
Okay. And another question, and it's actually about the support grant, but I'll wait to ask you that privately or in an email.
Okay. Do you have a lowest number of requests that you'd like to see? You don't want to see an application? No, I don't, because it's all relative. And, you know, a $2,000 grant to one person may be the equivalent to a $20,000 grant to a business. It's all relative, and that's why we'll probably group people in, or group applicants into ranges based on operating budget / request need examples. What else? Roberta.
So I don't know if there's like anything after, if a grant has been given to a group or an individual, is there any kind of reporting after the fact that is required by anybody?
Yeah.
Like, how did you use this money, or?
Not a report in the typical sense, but if you get the grant, I'll be reaching out to you saying, please send me your documentation. And then if you are requesting funding for now through December, we will be doing a monthly check-in report. So you'll be basically uploading your eligible expenses that you got money for. But in doing that, you will be telling us, what you use the money on. But it's not like a typical grant where you're, I had this many people come to my event and I hired this many artists. It's more of just making sure that you're doing what you said you were going to do.
So again, I haven't looked at the application itself yet, but when you fill out the application, I think I am hearing you say that you don't supply the documentation at that point. It's after. So you don't have to come prepared on your application with the evidence of the rent. You just say, this is what we pay for the rent. And then if we're accepted, then we get the documentation to you.
Yeah, and I just decided to do it that way since it's a lot of work and that's a lot of paper gathering and scanning and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, why put everybody to that much trouble if you're not going to get a grant, So I figured it'd be easier to just everybody that gets funded to then reach out and require the documentation before we can issue the contract and the money. But that being said, you should be mindful of, what do you have documentation of? You don't want to ask for reimbursement of an expense that you can't verify. So that's why many points throughout the application, it says documentation will be required. Any other questions on the? Any other questions? Okay. Oh, Fleming.
Hey, sorry. I'm sitting here reading the grant. I guess the biggest question is, are you going to have some office hours maybe where we could call you or set up a time to follow up if we have follow-up questions or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have questions, just shoot me an email. It's kmurray@orangecounty.nc.gov. And I would, I try to set up a time to chat just because my schedule is kind of weird right now with all of these million grants going on. So we'll set up a time to talk ASAP because I realize everybody's trying to get their ducks in a row soon.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Are we good? Y'all have asked a lot of really good questions. I appreciate it. This is unprecedented. So, we're kind of on the state level and the county level, we're kind of trying to figure this out as we go. So I appreciate you putting these questions out. I appreciate you understanding that I don't have all the answers right now, but I will do my best to get them for you.
Thank you.
All right. Melbury, did you want to stay on and ask me your question about artist support?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. If that's
Thank you,
okay,
Katie.
I will.
Bye, guys.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for all your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.